The Drumlogue has landed. Is it going to make top 10 lists for this year, for 2023? I don't know. But it is fun, so stick around and let's take a deeper look at it. Hello, Internet. Chris Cline here with Allen Music Center in San Antonio, Texas. And today we're going to take a deeper look at KORG's new Drumlogue. But before we do that, I want to ask that you please subscribe if you haven't already. We do have other channels that are guitar, bass, accordion, B&O, and piano-centric. I know that we're going to have more channels here pretty soon, like how to hide yourself from aliens or any number of things. So, please come back and explore with us a bit more. But, let's go ahead and take a deeper look at the KORG Drumlogue and how we can move around the device, create patterns, and just talk about its functionality and what it offers. And so here we are with the KORG Drumlogue, and let's go ahead and talk about the layout and its functionality, what kinds of sounds it has, what's built in, its connectivity, and all that. And let's just play around and then get to know it and be a little more familiar with it. It's a fun little machine, but I do have some issues with it. But let's go ahead and jump right in. So the KORG Drumlogue is the latest from KORG's Log line of synthesizers and now drum machines, and we'll see if they do anything further with this. But right out of the box, it does have some interesting patterns and some interesting sounds built into it. As far as what it offers, well, you have 4 analog drum sounds, which can be tweaked from here. You have 6 PCM or user samples, and then 1 multi-engine, which can be a noise, user synth, or VPM, which is the variable phase modulation. Kind of KORG's take on FM synthesis, if you will. You have 128 built-in programs, 64 are already occupied by presets. Same thing with your drum kits. 128 kits, 64 are occupied with presets. As far as your ins and outs, well, you have your headphone, and if you can see up here, you have left mono, right, or your stereo. 4 individual outputs. You have an audio input, which is a mini or an 1/8 inch, while our audio outputs are quarter. You have sync in and out, so it's going to play well with other devices that have sync in and out, namely the vocal line, a lot of the Arturia devices, and just about anything else that's being made today. You have standard 5-pin DIN MIDI in and out. You have 2 host and 2 device, which is going to be USB Type A and Type B. And then you have your wall wart and your power. You also have 3 onboard effects. You have different types of reverbs, you have different types of delays, and then you have your master effect, which can be like a compressor or EQ. And I gotta tell you, honestly, I'm not too thrilled with the effects on here. I played with the master effects a little bit, and the compressor was kind of wimpy, and the EQ didn't do much for me. And so far, I'm not super thrilled with the filters that are on here as well. They will self-resonate. We're probably not going to get into all that, but those things are lacking for me. And really, in the grand scheme of things, when I'm playing with anything in my home studio, any of my synthesizers, I almost always opt for something off of the synth rather than what's built into the synth as far as effects and other types of processing are concerned. It just depends. Maybe sometimes I'll run into a patch that I've tweaked, from a preset or that I've created, and in the process I have, added a delay or a reverb that seems to work within the context of that machine, then I'll go with it. But 95% of the time, I'm not using the effects that are built into these boxes that exist today, whether it be a synth or a drum machine. So let's get into the layout of the Drumlogue, and as you can see, there's a lot of tactile control that's built directly into the box. When we go up here to the top, we have these small little pots. This is going to be your mixer, so you can actually adjust the levels of the individual sounds. We have 13 sounds that we can play with, so we can adjust those here. And then we also have, as we start moving down the device, oh, and let's go up here. Of course, we have our master volume. Duh. Don't want to forget that. But as we start getting into the meat of the Drumlogue, now we have controls for our different drum sounds. So we can actually adjust things like the decay, the tuning, the drive, or the snappiness. It just depends on what the drum is. And there's more functionality or more parameters that you can adjust as you start menu diving. There is a little bit of menu diving on here. It's not too cumbersome. I was quite surprised at how easy it was to get around on the menus when you start jumping into manipulating other parameters. So now as we move down, we have our time button, which allows us to manipulate the timing of the device. So as you can see, we can go to 32nd, 16th, 8th, and then we can go to triplet as well. We can also change the length of our patterns from here as well. So as you can see right now, we're at 32 steps. We can go all the way to 64. We're all the way down to 1, which I don't know why you would do that, but it can be done. So let's go ahead and take it back to 32 so the pattern that we're currently working with doesn't get weird and we don't start going into prog land. These LEDs will tell you what your time is, the source. And then as we move over, we have the yes and no, which is going to allow us to confirm or not confirm things. But it's also going to allow us to jump through the different steps in our sequences. And it's also going to show us where we currently are in our sequence. So as you can see here, we have 2 LEDs. It's telling us that we have 16, 32. And right now we would be accessing the first batch of 16 steps, the first 16 steps. And we can do more with that. We go over here and we have more of our global and parameter controls. We have play, pause, record, and then we have program, select, save, kit, save, select, and then we have live, chain, loop, and then our pattern edit, step, accent, motion, and there's more functionality within these buttons as well. And we will get to that in a little bit. We have mute over here, we have part, we have page up, page down, tempo, shift, and shift of course is going to allow us to access other parameters that exist on these buttons. And you will see some of them here, like for instance on where we trigger all of our drums. We have audio in, choke, random part, clear, all, on, off, and so on and so forth. And we're not going to get into all these as well. I want you to have a basic understanding of how to create drum kits and patterns on here and how you can move around without getting into all this other stuff, which may or may not, depending on who you are, may or may not be minutia. So now that I've gone over all that as quickly as I possibly could, excuse me, let's talk about the sounds. So we have our bass drum, snare drum, low tom, and there's a little bit of delay on the snare drum. Low tom, and you can hear that there's a funky attack. It's like a high Q or a zap attack. Same for both. Closed hat, open hat, rim shot, clap, sample 1, sample 2, and then VPN. And as you can tell, it is kind of a funky, weird FM type of timbre. It's really, really cool. And then we have 3 different slots for our BPM. And then as we move down to the last 3 steps of our sequencer, we can access our delay, reverb, and master effect. So let's go ahead and play this again real fast. So pay attention to these lights. First 16 steps, second 16 steps. And now I have this set over to here by pressing the no or the right button, which means I would be editing the second batch of steps or steps 17 through 32 if I were to go into step mode or do anything else. So let's go ahead and turn it off. And now what we're going to do is we are going to clear out the entire part, right? So shift, clear all. Now the pattern is cleared and we have nothing happening. So let's go into step mode. Let's choose our part, bass drum, and we'll just go ahead and enter in some steps. And you know what I'm going to do real fast, so I'm going to go back here to our time and we're going to change this length to 16. We're just going to stay within 16 steps. Okay, so let's go ahead and choose our closed hat. Let me turn that up a little bit, make sure I don't get my head within the view of the device. Turning the drive up on the kick drum. ahead and add a snare drum. I'm not going to do anything really, really fancy here. We're just trying to get around on it. Or actually, you know, now what we can do is we can go back into live and go into record mode, and now we can go ahead and record our snare drum in real time. And let's do shift, clear part. Oh, there we go. So we got rid of our snare drum. Let's go ahead and add more hi-hat. All right. Now, what can we do from here? So now let's enter the accent mode. I'm going to go ahead and stop. And as you can see here, we're looking at our snare drums, but what I want to do is I want to look at our hi-hat. So I'm going to press part, and there we go. And we're still in accent mode. So I'm going to hold down slot number 15 or step number 15, and now we're in ratchet mode. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 3. And so now when we reach step 15, we're going to hear 3 repeats of the hi-hat. And let's do the same thing for 16. We'll go ahead and make it 4. Now you can see here it says ramp, and we can change the ramp to fall, rise, or random. So it's going to change the velocity. The velocity will either increase, decrease, or you will hear a random velocity. Now if it's really, really fast, it's going to be kind of hard to hear some of this, but let's go ahead and do this. Let's see if we can actually hear a change by, since we already have 15 and 16 engaged, let's do a ramp rise, and then you can hear it there, and then we'll do fall. So it gives you a little more dynamic action, right? When you're, you know, trying to create different patterns. And, you know, this is going to be good for those of you that are really into, you know, programming trap beats and things like that, to get really, really fast hi-hat patterns, or whatever pattern it is that you're trying to achieve. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add a couple more sounds to our sequence. And let's see what we want to do here. Now we're getting a little more action there. Pretty simple, right? Now, if we want to, and you can see there I'm adding an accent, because we're in accent mode just by pressing the button, and it's giving us different velocities all the way up to 127, so 32, 64, 96, so on and so forth. So if we wanted to choose a different part, we would just go ahead and choose the part that we want, and let's say we want the bass drum, and so there we are there, and then we can add an accent there on the last one, and let's see how that changes the feel. So you can really hear the kick drum attack on the 16th step of the 16th hit. So now that we've programmed a pretty simple beat, what else can we do to our sounds? And we haven't really explored this yet. So let's go ahead and just, go into live mode. Here's our kick drum, right? So what can we do to this? Well, if you look here, remember these first 4 drums are analog. So we have different types of attack transients: solid attack, leather attack, so you can hear it's a little more clicky, a little more bright, kind of like you're, slapping spatula onto leather, if you will. Quick attack, boxed attack, so it's a little muffled, little mid-range. Punch attack, soft attack. Is that an oxymoron? Bop attack, distorted click, met click. Change the tune once again. Now remember, we can come over here and we can page up and page down to get different parameters as well, right? So we have our sweep. Sweep time. Hold, attack, which just kind of changes the sustain, if you will. And then we can change the attack here as well. So if we turn it all the way up, get a pretty defined attack, turn it all the way down, not so much, and it actually kind of mutes the drum a little bit. Right? And so we're going to have the same types of parameters for every single one of the drums or the different slots that we have on here. We change our snap, tuning, decay. But if we come over here, we can change the tone even more. We can change the snap level, which once again is going to make it really, really dull. And then we have different models. So we have the 8 model. Guess what they mean by that. We have the 9 model. Continue guessing. White noise, red noise, pink noise, blue noise, lo-fi, lo-fi 10K, the last one was 14K, lo-fi 8K, and that's what we have for our drums. Now we can also adjust the spread on some of these, and when we do that, the only thing I can think that it's doing, honestly, when I'm sitting in front of monitors, I can, it changes the spread. And by changing the spread, it actually makes the image really, really wide, which to me tells me that it's doing something with the phase relationship between the left and the right channel. There's lots of different widening tools that exist in the audio production world. And I think they're probably doing the same thing here. Now, in the digital domain, when you're mixing everything and you start playing with phase, it's not really that big of a deal because you're dealing in a domain that's, well, ones and zeros. It's not in any sort of analogous form. And if it's going to add any sort of production value to whatever it is that you're doing, I say go for it. Now, when you start messing around with phase in the analog domain, mainly vinyl, that can cause problems later on when you go to press vinyl. It can cause issues with the needle mistracking and things of that nature. So just be aware of that. But I think that that's what it's doing, and I haven't looked into it further. That's just what it sounds like to my ears, to my brain. And so again, as we page around, we can also start incorporating more of our effects into here so that you have an effects mixer. And like I said earlier, the menu diving is actually pretty easy to deal with. You're not going up against, you're not going to be climbing a big mountain when menu diving on this device. Some Roland devices and other manufacturers out there, it can be a little cumbersome, but I found that this was actually pretty easy, and I found a lot of the functionality on my own just by poking around and not even looking at the manual. That's how easy it was, at least to me. So we can start incorporating, we've got reverb on here. You can turn that all the way down. I can turn the delay way up, or I can turn it way down. I can change our spread, and this is also going to change our panning as well. So we start doing this, it starts to get really funky if we start playing with the spread too much. And again, whatever it takes to get your production to where you're going, I'm all for it. Have fun. So now that we are listening to our effects, let's go ahead and turn this. We can turn our delay back up. We can go to our delay, And we can change the return, right, for pre, post. We can change the level. We have the reverb level here as well. We also have filters that we can apply to it, and we can also change the type of delay that we're listening to it. So let's go back to delay, mono. And again, we have a lot of different, oops, sorry about that. We have different algorithms, tape, so we have a nice slap back there. And of course, we can also change the timing on all these as well. With reverb, let's go ahead and turn our reverb up. So let's go back to here. Oops, sorry about that. And the reverb is set to riser, which is going to be kind of similar to different types of shimmer verbs or whatever you want to call them that exist out there, the Brian Eno type reverbs, where you have a reverb that decays into some sort of, pitch shifting. There's a number of pedals that will do this. Strymon has different algorithms. You've got the Astral Destiny from Earthquaker, which does it really, really well. And then if you really want to get really, really deep, you get an old Eventide device and you start programming it yourself and making it do fun things. But we get into our reverbs. Let's go ahead and find different reverbs. We have riser, submarine, space. So that has a really long decay to it. And once again, we can adjust a lot of these parameters. Hall. And then room. So tons of fun. Easy to get around on. But it's not quite, I don't think this is going to be a contender this year for, best of 2023. My biggest issue with it is it doesn't really lend itself to jamming. I'm a big fan of Arturia's drum machines, and I know I hear people complain and moan about the sounds, but if you're looking for a particular sound, then buy that drum machine. Don't buy the Arturia knowing that it's not going to sound like an 808 or a 909 or a 626 or whatever, a 606 or whatever. Get those machines, fork out the coin, or get an Akai MPC and load the samples in. But this doesn't really lend itself to jamming. And I also don't like these little buttons. These little buttons are not substantive enough to me. They feel, they're just weak. And me being a drummer, and maybe you've seen me play on the Drum Brute Impact, where I can really go to town on the pads. I can't even begin to do that on here, and I want to be able to do that on a drum machine. You can't do that on 808s or 909s, but with 808s and 909s, we're typically programming very specific beats. This here is kind of it's kind of in between. Between something like a pattern sequencer and something like a Drum Brute Impact, something that you can jam on, or an MPC. You can also load your own samples into here as well. But I don't think it's going to lend itself to being very creative because, again, it's not a machine that you can jam on. When you start getting into, wow, our effects just went really, really crazy. It's kind of fun. It really changed the feeling of this groove. We get into loop mode, for instance, and you can see here the loop mode is at moment, forward, one time, and sync. So what does this mean? Well, if I press some keys, it's going to loop whatever I've pressed. Change the speed. That doesn't have much functionality to me right there. And that certainly doesn't, unless we're trying to do old school Atari, Teenage Riot, Alex Empire, digital noise, thrash, whatever you want to call it. Now we can take it back to quarter speed. So what it means by sync is whenever I press some keys to loop those keys, it's going to go right back. It's going to be synced. So at whatever time the sequencer should pick up, that's where it's actually going to pick up. I don't think I was being clear with that. But it's going to keep the time rolling basically in the background, or the step, so it's going to return to whatever step should be played at that time when I release the keys. Free, it's a little bit different, right? It's going to stop it, and it's going to return to whatever point that I stopped to loop. Now that's fun and serves, some kind of purpose, but I had just found that on other drum machines. I'm going to go back to the Arturia Drum Brute Impact. It just works so much better, and I like having quick access to those features directly on the device, which makes the device more, when we're talking about the Arturia, more of a box that you can jam on. I'm sure people are going to do some great things on here with all the different synthesis options, the SDK, to where you can program your own sounds, your own effects, just like you can on the Mini-Log and the Pro-Logs. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of really, really cool plugins, if you will, coming out for this. But I just wish that it were a little more jam-friendly. You can randomize parts. You can chain programs up to 16. So there are things that you can do as far as this being a compositional tool that are pretty handy, but I like to be able to get on a drum machine and just jam, and I don't feel like I can really do that here. I feel like at the price point, honestly, I think that it might be a really, really great entry-level, more advanced drum machine for some people. It certainly kind of flies under the Electron radar price point, that is. I find the Electron product is a lot of fun and a little more jammable. And then the MPC-1 at its current price point, which I want to say retail on that is $799. It was $699. That device is absolutely unbeatable with its touchscreen and its functionality, with adding different plugins and synth sounds, and of course being able to load any samples if you want into it, and it's just fun to jam on. I feel like that Korg kind of missed the boat here. I'm not saying that this is a bad drum machine. I think that they packed a lot into this footprint, and there's a lot that you can do with it. But I think that for those of you that really like to jam and do things in real time, I think that you're going to find it's a little clunky in regards to that. But as I showed you, programming, step programming and programming in real time once you go into record is a lot of fun. If you like to program in real time, then you need to turn on the metronome, which is a global setting. And to get to global settings, you have to press Shift and time, and that's going to take you into all your global settings. That's where you turn on the metronome. It would be nice if they had a way to turn the metronome on and off really, really quickly without jumping into global settings. So maybe that's something that they'll do with a firmware update. But it is a fun machine. It's just not my favorite machine. And let's see what they do when they update some of the firmware, and as people start talking about it more and more online. I know that Korg listens, and maybe they will incorporate some of these things that us, the users, have been saying. Once again, thank you for sticking around. I hope that you got a little more out of this video. Zach had presented this before, but he did more of his philosophical approach. Let's just take a quick listen to it and whatnot. I think hopefully now you have a better idea on how to move around on this machine, how to program it. And we didn't get really, really deep in all the parameters because, once again, you can tweak, until your eyes fall out. There's lots of flexibility, but there are limitations too. It doesn't feel like it lends itself to jamming. As I stated, I really don't like the step buttons. I want to be able to have something that's a little more, just a little more weight and a little more playability. I want to be able to tap around on a drum machine to get ideas, and I just don't feel like I can do that on this machine. I'm not saying that it's bad. It just doesn't check all the boxes for me, and nothing's going to check every single box. But it is a fun machine, lots of sound design capabilities, and I think once you get into the SDK, it's really going to open it up. And again, as I had stated before, I think once people start diving into the SDK and making their own effects and other sounds, that we're going to start seeing a lot more, hearing a lot more from the Drumlogue. So don't let my opinion sway you. Go out and find one, play it, and see how it feels. I think that it's going to, get a lot of people started in their, productions, whether it be hip hop, trap, electronic music, ambient, down tempo, whatever you want to call it. I think that this could be a really good stepping stone. But if you want something a little bit more, you're probably going to be looking for, something like an MPC Live or an MPC One, or maybe some of the Electron boxes. But still a cool box, on its own. So with that being said, let's get the comments flowing down below. Let's be nice to each other. Let's be civil. We need more civility in the world. I know you hear me say things that are similar to that all the time, but we really do. We really do. Let's just make sure that we're looking out for each other and creating content and creating great music and using all these wonderful toys that exist in the universe today. And with that being said, once again, I'm Chris Cline, Alma Music Center in San Antonio, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.